When did anti-government change to mean hate? Let's talk about the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Granite Grok.
The New England Take.
All right, excited to join on the show for the first time, Steve MacDonald. He's the owner of Grok Media, as well as the managing editor of GraniteGrok.com, where place this show is now posted every Saturday. Very grateful for him for signal boosting the show. Welcome, finally, to the New England Take.
Hey, AJ, how you doing?
Doing great. I really appreciate you taking the time, and want to talk specifically. This isn't new. It's been on. You've been listed on there for a while, but
2022, yeah.
Yes, it's 2022, but it's timeless. Like, I got the Southern Poverty Law Center is constantly referred to in the mainstream media as the source to find where the hate is, where you find all these evil people, whether they are Nazi or Moms for Liberty, like in the Granite Grok. Like, I don't understand why anybody respects this organization. It's strictly because they've been there forever, I feel like, and they've got these big donors that basically fund their fancy looking maps and everything like that. I mean, think historically back to 2022 when you first saw the Granite Grok on there. What was your first opinion on that?
What took them so long? You know, why weren't we on there sooner? And of course, to clarify, we are on there as an anti-government organization. We are not on there as a hate group. Although if you ask liberal women in the state of New Hampshire, they'll tell you we're a hate site and we hate women and we're haters. And anybody who's actually read the website, which they haven't, knows this is not true. We just disagree with them. And the Southern Poverty Law Center, which of course started out as a great organization back in 1971, they actually were a civil rights organization. They did defend minorities in court. You know, they did pro bono work. But at some point in the 80s, the guy, Morris Dees, who was a co-founder, discovered, oh, I can make a lot more money if I just point out hate, and then people will write me checks. And that's what they became. And they really are. The SPLC is filled with people who are haters and racists and sexist and mean to LGBTQ people, which has come out in the press in recent years. So they are a hate site themselves.
It's this weird... It's weird. You see yourself, your heroes become the enemies. So we got the Joker going on here, or Two-Face going on. It's so weird. Like, the ACLU is the same exact journey that they've been on. They started this fantastic organization. We may not agree 100% with everything they were sporting back in the day when it comes to the way things were handled, but standing up for people that needed to have their rights defended. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. How could you argue with that? And then they turn around and defend a conservative, traditions-oriented political site. Yeah, I mean, you're not even like a libertarian in the more political sense of the word, in my opinion, when it comes to like party perspectives. It's much more traditional conservative values are what a lot of your op-eds are centered around.
Classical liberalism, we call ourselves conservatarians. We're conservatives with libertarian leanings. We have libertarians who write for us. We have conservatives who write for us. We've had Democrats who write for us who happen to be conservative, more like the Kennedy variety. So, and then we have everybody in between that, you know, and it's all center-right. And we are the crazy thing, and, you know, civil rights organizations, right? So what do we stand for? Well, we defend the U.S. Constitution. We defend the New Hampshire Constitution. And who are the guys that stood up and said, this is how we should do things? It was a bunch of guys who didn't trust the government at all, including their own. And so we're basically doing what they did, and we're defending civil rights, and groups like the ACLU and the SPLC are like, you're haters. Well, we're anti-government, but we're really not, are we? We're sort of the guys that sort of ideologically descended from the founders, you know, your classic liberals who think that small government matters, that limited government matters, that, you know, Skip likes to say, he's a co-founder of GraniteGrok.com. He says the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen, and that is so very true. And there's examples of it everywhere. I mean, even right now, you can see the battles going on in D.C. and all across the country about DOGE and trying to trim the government down to a more manageable size and then giving those responsibilities back to the states where they belong. And everybody's like, oh, my God. Well, I understand why they're a little frightened about it, because most of the people alive today have never experienced anything like that, and they don't know what to expect.
I mean, this seems to totally be a side effect of big money in government, and the revolution never stops when it comes to the left, in my opinion. Like, it's you see it on both sides. Definitely, there's big money when it comes to government and these large activist organizations. And you look at it on the right. I mean, the one who always gets kicked is AFP with the Koch brothers and all that, but it is a much larger apparatus, in my opinion, when you look at the left-wing activist outlets, because they've really done a good job, or organizations, not outlets, with playing the game of these groups like the ACLU and the SPLC to change the mission to we're never going to reach equilibrium or equity or whatever the hell it is they're searching for. It's impossible. Like, I was really hopeful after the Supreme Court, regardless of whether it's technically constitutional or not, but Obergefell with gay marriage becoming essentially the law of the land. It's not the law of the land, but you know what I mean. And it's like, okay, maybe we're finally reaching a point where we can slow this down. We figure out if we're doing things the right way. We take a look at our government, see how we can honestly focus on fixing the system. And it said, no, it's only gotten more aggressive, in my opinion, where now we're focused more and more on the more niche group populations. We're going to look closer and closer in on these little groups, and these guys are the victim, and we need to treat this tiny population just as bad as blacks during the civil rights movement. And it's bonkers to me.
It is crazy. And of course, you have to realize that the left's goal is Marxism. So Democrat socialism is, even if you just say democracy is the first step on your way to Marxism, to communism. You can't get there without it. Just ask Lenin, just ask Stalin. They'll tell you. You can quote them. We rely on, they love democracy. They think it's great because with a democracy, you can get yourself voted into communism. And so to get there, though, you have to destroy all the institutions. And they've been walking through the institutions. You know, we know that. They've been doing it for 50, 60 years. And they've taken control of them, and they grab anything they can, including the ACLU, including the SPLC. You know, they just put people inside there the same way they took over the universities. You just keep putting your people in and putting your people in and putting your people in. And the next thing you know, you've got this completely different mission statement from where you started. You know, the SPLC started out as pro, minority rights, minority civil rights. Now they could care less. They like the hate map because they use it to fundraise. And so, yeah, and we've gotten in this crazy place. And of course, all the algorithms on social media sort of narrowly corral people into these corners. And then they find themselves in these places where there is, on both sides, anger and resentment. And so one of the things we always talk about at Granite Grok, and I always try to emphasize this, is that it doesn't matter what your political opinion is or what side of the argument you're on. You have to be open to listening to everybody else's speech, and you can't get angry or resentful. You'll be fine then. You won't turn into some nut job on the roof with a sniper rifle. You'll be okay. Now, the left, on the other hand, their goal is to destroy everything. Revolution is why they exist. Sergei Nechayev wrote this little pamphlet, and everybody in the communist movement since then, since all the way back to Lenin, this is like their little Bible. And in it, he says very clearly, we have to do horrible things. We have to destroy everything. So when you look at, most Democrats aren't like that. They don't want to be that way. They have no interest in that. A lot of them voted for Trump in 2024. They just want to be left alone. They might be a little more socially left. They think that maybe there are some things the government won't totally screw up if you give them money, which is not true. They will screw it all up. But the ones in the fringe, which is a lot of them because that's their mission, they live on resentment and anger, and that's what motivates them. And they don't always show it. Some of them are really smart about it, but who throws the bricks? Who scratches the Teslas? Who starts things on fire? It's always the left.
Yeah, it's always been hilarious to me, the pointing out that, the right are going to be your lone wolves that are going to do all these horrible things. Like, yeah, once in a while, like you'll see crazy things coming from some Proud Boy group in some state somewhere does something crazy. And you'll see some militia movements. But you look at where the actual damage has occurred, which political movement over the last 50 years especially has really caused widespread damage. Think back to the George Floyd riots and everything that happened during that the response you saw from the right is one day in DC where shit went sideways, was not good. Was not good in my opinion in many ways. Yes, it was right to protest and if you're following the rules and you're not breaking windows and crowding hallways and things like that, whatever. It was not handled correctly by the police or anything like that, but that's the one example that they're able to harp on when there are billions in damage from the left's upsetness that Trump got into office.
Yeah, well, they have had better media up until recently. And the left continues. The media has like no credibility, but they're all in. They're here to tear it down, just like the Democrats in our party, the people who are running the party. And there's some debate about whether it's the media running it or the Democrats running the media, and it doesn't really matter. It's the same message. So they're interchangeable. You can flip a coin and go, okay, it's the media. Tomorrow it's the party. And, whatever happened on January 6th, obviously there were FBI embedded in the crowd. I'm pretty sure everybody got wound up and riled up. And all you got to do is a little research on crowds and people in general. And you can see how they knew how to get those people excited enough to do whatever they did. Most of them were peaceful. They were all just walking around the Capitol, oh, look. And then next thing you know, they're in court in D.C. or in a jail with no court date. And, those are just so rare, those things. All the lone wolves that we've seen have been transgender people who are on drugs and have some sort of mental illness. And part of that problem is fed by the narrative from the left and the media that paints people like me as a hater. And then, we see this example time and time again. People come at us and we love it. First of all, thanks. Just bring it because we don't care. Okay, just keep coming. And they say stuff. And I say, okay, so show me where I said that. And they can't because they've never read anything like that on Granite Grok. And we don't stand for it. We don't put up with it in our comments. We have a very open commenting system. You can come and talk about whatever you want, preferably the topic that the post is on. But as long as you don't threaten anybody in comments, you don't threaten any public figures, you don't give implied threats or actual threats or violent statements, you can say anything else you want. But we do not tolerate that because that's not what we're here for. Like I said, if you're angry and resentful, you got to get rid of that baggage before you open your mouth. It's going to get you in trouble.
Yeah, and then so going back to the SPLC hate map, in quotes for sure. They're literally, you can tell that this is being used for political purposes when they're literally equating or groups like the Granite Grok and Moms for Liberty with the American Nazi Party in the exact same paragraph that they're referring to New Hampshire organizations. The Proud Boys, so this is the list they have for New Hampshire. They have Proud Boys, Patriot Front, American Nazi Party, immediately Moms for Liberty, Rockingham County, the Constitution Party, which once again another one what? That doesn't make any sense. The Granite Grok, No Left Turn in Education, Jihad Watch, it's obvious. No matter what way you look at it, this is being used for political purposes. There are so many center-left people that are untrustworthy, that don't trust the government, are pointing at this going, you're equating these guys to actually let me write for them occasionally with these terrible racist organizations. Come on, guys. Let's stop pretending. Let's stop giving these people money and stop letting the mainstream media promote them as a resource.
Well, it's guilt by association, right? I remember, every time a Republican does something stupid in the state of New Hampshire, the media immediately goes out and all the ground troops on the left, and they go find every Republican they have, and they demand that they denounce it. They demand that they make a statement. Nobody does that on the left. We try to encourage it, but, that's the way it is. So the hate map, even though most of those organizations are just for limited government, not even anti-government. They say anti-government. Where? Prove it. Show me one place. We have anarchists in New Hampshire in the Libertarian Party. I don't support anarchy. That's mob rule. That's where that leads. There's no way that vacuum doesn't create a strongman who then becomes a tyrant. It just isn't possible. Because of human nature. That's just how people are wired, right? So by association, we look like, that. And so we've had people over the years, I mentioned the awfuls, the the liberal women who say these things. And, we've even had to have lawyers write letters to them saying, listen, if you're going to continue to tell us that we're a hate site and that we are haters and that we hate women, you're going to need to come up with some proof. I want you to come up with a list of direct linked statements that prove your point, or we may have to sue you. And then they go away and shut up. But why should I have to pay a lawyer to write a letter to get them to stop that? Now, we do it mostly for fun. So we can write about it, right? Hey, this is what we did, look at what happened. And they will never stop because it's the revolution. Everything's the revolution, right? So the hate map, it's the SPLC. They give it credibility, and then they use that credibility to justify their bad behavior by calling us haters when in fact it's slander.
All right, let's move on for a minute away from this nonsense. Definitely check out the granitegrok.com. There's a lot of great articles on there, a whole bunch of podcasts, including my own, that you can check out, posted every week, which is great. I mean, what's the future for the Grok? I mean, what are you hoping to be continuing the growth of this outlet?
Well, last summer we did a complete site rebuild. We've always been kind of a state-level blog with global reach. And depending on how or when we are being suppressed by big tech, at various times we've had significant reach. And so because we have a national audience and a global audience and a New Hampshire audience, and then we started Vermont Grok, and then we started Maine Grok, during the rebuild, we siloed that stuff. So it all shows up at the top of the page. Everything's just jumbled together in the order that it gets published. And not jumbled, it's very organized and scheduled every single day. And then, well, it is. I'm not anal. And then it goes into its silos, right? So if you click on New Hampshire, you'll get all New Hampshire content, Vermont, all Vermont content, Maine. National is all U.S. stuff. Could be another state, could be a national issue. If it's world, it's happening someplace else, even though it may have impact here. So we built a faster site. We took care of some internal issues when we did the rebuild. And so the goal there was to make it easier for people to find what they wanted to read without having to read everything. We had an old school scroll front page, and you just could go forever and ever and ever and ever. And if you click the tag, you might get what you wanted in that group. So we cleaned all of that up. Like I said, site's faster. We are trying to grow our audience back from 2020, 2021, when big tech was crushing everybody. So that's coming along pretty good. Since the rebuild, we've got about a 30% hike in traffic daily, so that's not bad. We need to get back to 2.5 million a year. We're probably somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million views a year. And, just ultimately, the goal is to keep the site up so that people have this voice. So we cover stories that the regular media doesn't cover them. We cover some of the stories they cover in a way they'll never cover it. COVID's a fine example. Just about every conspiracy theory that's come along since 2000 that's been true, well, we were doing that all the way back to 2006. So, we have this obligation. We feel we publish op-eds no other paper will publish. We give people a voice. If one of our authors or an op-ed writer goes after a candidate or an issue, we let that candidate or issue have the exact same audience to rebut them if they choose to. More often than not, they don't, but we invite them to do it. And I just think that's a great way and then we comment, like I said, are pretty wide open. As long as you're not talking about threats or violence, you can say whatever you want. Bring in the evidence, bring in the links, show us receipts, go at each other, but be polite. And we want to just keep doing that, and we just want to grow that audience and get more people involved.
Awesome. All right, Steve MacDonald of the GraniteGrok.com and the owner of Grok Media. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today about all this.
Crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff.
All this hate.
So much hate, Steve. Come on, what the hell?
On the left.
All right, definitely be sure to check out granitegrok.com and submit work to them for sure. Both sides of the aisle. If you know someone on the other side that's constantly whining and moaning about what the conservatives are doing, they're a lot more open to having the other side actually have a voice than, unfortunately, many outlets on the left. So please be sure to do that. Please be sure to reach out to me too, aj@newenglandtake.com. I have people from both sides of the aisle on the show all the time, and I really appreciate any tips anyone may have over there. But newenglandtake.com, please be sure to like, subscribe. We're posting on all major podcast platforms, so be sure to check us out there if that's your best way for you to check out the show. And we'll talk to you soon.